All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Peter Skaggs. Peter, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
I'm honored to be here, Kevin.
I'll tell you, I've been looking forward to this because, well, you know what? I want to start by just giving a shout out to Ryan Lee because I had Ryan on the podcast a little back, and it's cool when you find, I'm trying to remember who introduced me to Ryan. I have to go look it up and see. But when I went to his website, he had photos with him and other people and all of that. And one of the photos was him and this friend of mine, Randy Garn. And I've known Randy for years. And as soon as I saw Ryan with Randy, I'm like, Ryan is definitely one of my kind of people. So before I even ever talked with him.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know that, especially like when you and I got introduced because of Ryan. I knew before I ever talked with you the first time around that like Peter is definitely my kind of people,
Mm,
because of how we got connected.
yeah, yeah,
And what a power, right? What a testament right there to the power of right relationships, which is of course what this podcast is all about, and what we're going to be talking about today.
yeah.
And so I just, we're just going to have a heart-to-heart conversation today, and I'm looking forward to this, especially after you and I already got to connect, and I've really been looking forward to doing the interview with you today, Peter. And we'll just start off, but I'll just ask at least a simple question on my end, to get us rolling. What do you do and who do you serve, Peter?
I appreciate that. Yeah, Ryan Lee is one of those people we all should know.
Yeah,
He's a
yeah,
phenomenal human being. And
he sure
Randy
is.
Garn, I actually connected Ryan and Randy years ago, and Randy's also one of those just the best people on the planet.
You
Um,
bet.
So what I do, if you've ever met somebody who just they have real estate, they own real estate, and you wonder, how do they do that? They're busy professionals, they're hardworking, they're working around the clock, and yet they've also been able to somehow, some way, establish a little bit of a real estate portfolio. And you kind of wonder, how did they do that? Well, I teach people how to do that, how to invest in real estate. I had that question probably about, let's see, 19 years ago.
Okay.
So I had
Okay.
that question, how are people doing this, And I just didn't have, some of the people around me necessarily that were teaching me how to get into real estate. And I just wondered how to do it. And I've learned over the 17 years through a lot of trial and error. And now I just help guide people through their journey of buying real estate. And the goal for me is to help them invest in real estate without making it a second job, a side hustle, without having to go fix and flip, be a weekend warrior, an evening, flipper. We want them to be able to invest in real estate without making it another job. So that's what we do, help busy professionals who know they want to invest in real estate. We take them from interested to invested, usually inside of 90 days without making
Okay.
it a second job. So,
Wow.
yeah,
That's fantastic. Because you're
yeah,
right. I mean, I think of like the entrepreneurs in my world. Yeah, they're focused on their primary business. Because, well, especially the entrepreneurs that I know, because they're so doggone passionate about doing what they do. And they might like to invest in real estate, but you're right that they don't necessarily want to take away time from what they're already doing, because they're getting so much joy and fulfillment from it. And
yeah.
so that's really awesome. Well, okay, so how did you even get into doing this, Peter? What's the best? When I was a kid, I wanted to be a fireman, and I never became a fireman. And I would have never imagined when I was a kid that I'd be doing what I get to do today either. And I imagine you probably didn't either. So, what's the backstory there?
Yeah. I look back and, in preparation for you and I and our visit, I went back and listened to a number of your podcasts. I love this principle, this concept of relationships. It is such a meaningful thing that I don't know that enough people, we talk about like networking or, working our sphere of influence, but really, very rarely do we talk about just deep, meaningful relationships, and the impact that those have in our lives. So I was thinking about that, what brought me here. And so it's been a few relationships.
Yeah.
over the years. So we'll probably get into this a little bit later, but my grandpa had a little bit of a meaningful impact in my life. I never knew my grandpa. He passed away when my dad was 16 years old, but
Okay.
he owned real estate, and it skipped a generation. My dad, my aunts, my uncles didn't really own real estate. My grandpa did though, and I heard about that legacy when my grandpa passed away. A large part of the reason my grandma was able to raise five children as a single mother was because of the real estate that my grandpa had acquired. He had
Okay.
built and developed, and so that helped her to survive in amidst a very difficult circumstance.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's one of those things that I knew kind of growing up, for whatever reason. I don't know if it's in my genes or what, but ultimately I knew I wanted to be in real estate. And
Okay.
then I was in an apartment complex, living as a student at the university, and got a new roommate, and we became friends. That roommate, his older brother, was starting a job. This was back in 2000. Websites were still kind of a new thing.
Hmm.
Isn't that wild to think? Just 26 years ago. They're
Yeah.
still very new. And he was looking for salespeople. I needed a job. I desperately needed a job. He needed salespeople. So, I applied, and he hired me out of desperation. And I helped him sell websites, and we quickly evolved into kind of the real estate space, and more specifically the mortgage space. And we started helping mortgage professionals with their websites, so that they could take an online loan application, they could show who they are, what kind of loan programs. And so we got to doing that. And I got to travel. While I was a student at the university, I got to travel the United States to these conferences, and I was seeing all the money coming into the mortgage industry in the mid 2000s. This is leading up to the 2008-9 crash.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
watching all of that money flow in, and I graduated and wanted a job in and around real estate, and had this mortgage now experience. I could talk the talk.
Yeah.
And so I got hired by one of my clients, and so another relationship there. Hired by my one of my clients, and then quickly became a mortgage loan officer recruiter, and then started learning the trade. And then the industry fell apart in 2008-9.
Yep.
And I went out looking for a new job, but nobody was really hiring at all. Like, I was willing to do anything. I had a little family at that point, and just could not. And so I actually partnered with a buddy, another relationship,
Uh-huh.
partnered with a buddy who had a little more experience in mortgage. And he and I started my mortgage company, and that was 17 years ago. We
Wow.
just hit our 17-year mark in May. And so here I am, so blessed, 17 years later, in the mortgage space. But I should back up. In 2007, 2007, yeah, 2007. Everybody was getting into real estate. Everybody was getting into real
Yeah.
estate. Your mailman, the
That's right.
UPS drivers investing in,
Everybody.
yeah, everybody was getting into. And then so I wanted to be one of everybody. And so my uncle is one of those men that I just look up to and adore. He's been very successful financially. He owns a handful of investment properties, but he's been a little bit, wouldn't say tight-lipped about it, but it's not something he readily talks about, some of his financial success. He happened to be in town, and I was asking him, he lives in Arizona. I was asking him what he was doing. He says, "Oh, I'm looking to buy an investment property." I said, "Could I follow you?" And so basically he did all the work, and I just tagged along and asked a bunch of questions. And ultimately he bought a property, and Kevin and I bought a property five doors up, literally five doors up from the home he bought as my first investment. And so that's kind of how I got into the game of real estate investing. And like I mentioned, I've, through a lot of trial and error, have, learned some things along the way, but have been heavily invested in real estate since 2017. So 19
Okay.
years now I've been investing in real estate. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. So what are some results that you've helped folks get that you're just incredibly proud of, Peter?
Yeah. Great question. So I think I'm the most proud about helping people overcome that initial fear, the
Okay.
analysis paralysis. I have some really sophisticated investors that I work with. I've got a gentleman who has a portfolio of 30 some properties. We're going to refinance a number of them, help him. And I love doing that. But ultimately, that's a little more of an economic help. It's some of these individuals who they know they want to be in real estate. They've maybe bought some of the courses, they've gone through some of the, online trainings, YouTube, whatever, and they're just stuck in analysis paralysis. I just helped Christopher. He literally had been looking for a little over a year and he's an engineer. He is a
Okay.
very, very smart, analytical, detail-oriented individual. And I love that about him. But man, that analysis paralysis was just, a very real thing for him. He was just having a hard time pulling the trigger. And we were able to bring to him a framework that I've developed over the years of making my own investment decisions. And I was able to bring that framework to him, and more importantly, a tool that he could use, that he was able to then take couple deals that we had pointed him to, and he was able to run those through an analysis and ultimately got green lights to go ahead and buy. And so as a result, he was able to move forward. He's now bought two investment properties in just the last, 60 days.
Wow.
So went from a year and a half of kind of knowing he wanted to be in it,
Yep.
busy in his day job, having a hard time taking that next step. It's scary. You don't have time to become an expert. It's a big investment potentially, and that's scary. And you don't necessarily, there's so many voices out there. You don't know who you can trust and who's really doing it right. And so he was able to find all three of those with us. He could trust us. We could help him. We could reduce the time and help him minimize the risk of that investment. So,
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And that's got to make you feel pretty incredible, Peter,
yes.
to just be able to help somebody out like that. And that's kind of been like, okay, year and a half into this, and like I want to do this, but I just,
Yes.
and to now two deals, done deal,
Yep.
and yeah,
I
that's
might add, before you and I started here, we were talking a little bit about, tomorrow's not promised to anybody, right? And I think about that, and not that I'm morbid or anything, but I'm conscious of I've got children, I've got a wife who I love, and I want to make sure that they're taken care of. And so that's that Christopher and a lot of my clients, we're just trying to help them set up something that's a little more, they have more control over, and that it's real money now today versus maybe throwing it into a 401k or an IRA that's not available to them until well down the road, or there's strings attached, there's taxes and there's penalties and other things potentially attached to being able to use that money. And so we're trying to help people today with financial freedom today. And I truly believe that through real estate done right, you can be financially free inside of 10 years. I genuinely truly believe that was the case for me. And I've seen it in the lives of a number of friends that I've helped as well. So,
wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, okay, so now that we've got a little bit of context set here, and listeners have an idea about, who you are and what you're all about, I want to switch gears just a little bit. I want to start talking about the relationship side of all of this. So, have you ever been introduced, Peter, to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
yeah. I love this question. You ask this question, most of the people you interview. I love
Yes,
it, and
yes.
I've been thinking a lot about it in preparation for this conversation. And two people come to mind here,
Okay.
Kevin, and one of them is a little bit unique. I don't know that I've heard anybody on your podcast talk about it before, but I mentioned my grandpa.
Uh-huh.
And my grandpa has had a meaningful influence in my life. I didn't know him. He passed away when my dad was 16 years old, so long
Okay.
before I was born.
Uh-huh.
And but yet his legacy, and so I don't know if that counts as having a relationship, but his legacy he was an entrepreneur. He owned a development company, and then he was building buildings, and he kept having to rent heavy equipment. He's like, I can own heavy equipment, and I can rent it out to other people when I'm not using it. So then he got a heavy equipment company, and then he had a real estate agency, and so he was doing this development. He was like full blown developing neighborhoods, and we've got streets named after family members up in Missoula, Montana, where my grandpa did a lot of his development. And that legacy has meant so much to me. I knew as a child I wanted to be in real estate because grandpa was in real estate.
Wow. Wow.
And so I can tell you today definitively that I probably would not be in real estate, that I would not be in real estate had it not been for my grandpa and his, efforts in real estate. And again, I didn't learn from him, so my business wasn't developed because of, powwowing with grandpa about
Sure.
ideas and things. It was just that idea that was planted, and somehow it's in me genetically, to be in real estate. So that was one of those relationships, a little bit unique. So,
Yeah, you
uh,
bet.
and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that legacy. There's a picture that has, Skaggs Realty, and it's my grandpa standing out front. You could see some machinery behind him, and it's a little office that he worked out of. And I don't know why, but that picture was, ingrained in my mind as a child. And then to this day, it's what I picture. So
That's powerful. That's
yeah.
powerful.
The
Yeah.
second is the person you called out at the beginning, and I'm so glad you called him out, Ryan Lee. So a little bit of vulnerability here. I probably about 10 years ago I had started my brokerage 17 years ago,
Okay.
and I didn't have a lot of experience in the mortgage space. I had some minimal experience, but by the time I was really learning the industry, it was so Wild West, these option arms and ninja loans and all these weird, wild things. And I just never really learned the right way to own mortgage company. And then, the industry just fell apart. And I was without a job for a good 6 months looking, truly trying to get hired. Like I would have flipped burgers if they were hiring, but nobody was hiring. And so I ended up starting my own mortgage brokerage with a buddy.
Okay.
And for about 6 or 7 years, God just was good. He took care of me. I was able to keep food on the table, but I wasn't making a ton of progress. And
Okay.
and I started to kind of pray for help and a mentor, somebody who could come into my life and assist me, and started to have some success. And but still looking for that mentor, that help, that somebody. And my wife, so I met somebody, and he was going to help me invest in a 12-plex. We were going to buy a 12-unit apartment complex. And I made the mistake, or maybe it was the right thing to do, but I took my wife over to see the 12-plex.
Okay.
And it had all the issues, mold, meth, you name it. It was a dump. And, it was a bad property. I'm seeing money signs. My wife's looking at me saying, "You don't even know which side of the hammer to use. How are you going to go in and lead a group to rehab this property?" My partner, he just wanted to be in. He found the deal, but ultimately I was the money. I was going to be the financing, et cetera.
Okay.
So he had very little exposure from a financial standpoint. And so he's like, "Yeah, let's go." And so my wife is hanging out with some of the women of the neighborhood, book club, Tupperware party. I don't know what it was, Kevin, but they were all hanging out. And my wife was talking. I'm sure she's like, "My husband's a doofus. He's going to buy this 12 Lex. He's going to bankrupt us. He doesn't know what he's doing." And then she happened to be talking to a neighbor, Bethany. And Bethany said, "You should have him talk to my husband. He teaches a little bit of real estate investing." And she's like, "Oh, that's great. How many doors does he have?" And he had X number of doors. My wife almost fell out of her seat because we kind of knew them in the neighborhood, a little
Okay.
bit, and was just really surprised because they're so humble and such good people. Well, They got together and they forced us to have a double date. And then my wife said to me, "You're going to be nice to this guy. You're going to talk to him. You're going to, you're going to behave, And we went to dinner, and it was Ryan Lee. Bethany is his wife, and Ryan and I just hit it off. We were cut from the same cloth, and
Wow.
he helped
Wow.
me, showed me a better way, and ultimately, put me on a path to where now I teach a lot of what he teaches.
Okay.
The model of this turnkey real estate, the where we're not having to make it a second job. And I really just his message resonated with me so much. And now he refers a lot of business. We're not in business together, but we run parallel together. And I help his community. He helps me. My business is fundamentally different today. 8 years. That was 9 years ago. I think we went to dinner. 9, 10 years ago, we went to
Okay.
dinner. My business is fundamentally different because of that relationship, because of that dinner that my wife forced me to go on. She said, "You're going to be nice to this guy. You're going to be his friend, And now I was a dutiful husband, and to this day, I consider him one of my closest friends. I'm so grateful
Wow.
for him and that relationship.
So that you guys are like 9, 10 years into that relationship now,
Yes.
since you guys went to dinner that first night and stuff.
Yep. Yep.
And wow, wow. So that relationship right there has some serious longevity at this point and stuff. And so what what's an example of a situation where you personally, Peter, got to make a really substantial impact? And maybe in the moment, maybe it even surprised you a little bit where you're just like, wow, look at what just happened there. But yet, that would have never been possible if not for either one of the relationships that we've been talking about here with either your grandpa or with Ryan. What's an example of something like that where you were empowered in that way?
I think something that I'm going through, it's maybe a maturing of my business.
Okay.
Something that Ryan's allowed me to do is um, in the mortgage space, we can have a mortgage license and I can do reverse mortgages. I can do VA loans. I can do USDA. I can do conventional. I can do non-qualified mortgages, which are like DSCR or bank statement loans. I can do commercial loans. I have so many loan products. And for the first, probably dozen or so years of my business, I would say yes to anybody. Let me help you. Let me help you. Let me help you. Partly because I have a serving heart, I want to serve and help
Yeah.
people. But also partly because that's what you do in the mortgage space. You help everybody, anybody who needs a loan, you help them. But the problem with that is that you don't become, you tend to go a mile wide and an inch deep on these products. And
Yeah.
it creates some difficulties at times if you're not an expert. And so what Ryan's really done for me is by referring business to me and helping me, I have been able to shed a lot of those and in a great way. I've got phenomenal loan officers who work for me and my company. And
Okay.
I've got, one young lady that she's great at helping first-time home buyers. She just loves them to death. And so I just refer any and all of my first-time home buyers to her.
Okay.
I've got somebody who's an expert at reverse mortgages. I just send him my reverse mortgages. And I am solely focused now on helping busy individuals, hardworking individuals. I'm helping them create a plan that allows them to become financially free inside of 10 years. That is all I do on a daily basis, and I love it. And what's happening here, Kevin, is I'm having more of an impact. One, more people know how to refer me because I'm not a jack of all trades.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm a master of one.
Yeah.
And then two, when I'm having conversations with them, they're much deeper, more meaningful because I'm coming with a lot of experience and knowledge and know-how. And I don't have some of those, oh, I forgot you have to do this type conversations because this is my wheelhouse. It's mortgages are so complex, and then you want to be an expert in 50 different loan programs. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work well. So I think that The impact I'm having on people now is that I can talk the talk because I'm helping people who were where I was, 17 years ago when I
Yeah.
wanted to get into real estate. I'm helping them to get into real estate with confidence, and clarity, and ease around that decision. That's a difficult decision normally. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And
answer
that
your
is
question. Is that right? That's good.
that is brilliant right there. And what you just said, about you had all these, loans that you could do, but because now that you've just narrowed your focus to this one, not only, did you get to shed a lot of stuff that like, oh, I don't have to do all of that stuff now. I'm just going to focus on becoming the best that I can be at doing this thing right
Yes.
here. And as a result of that, you've now become known for the guy being the guy who does that thing right there,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
And so now people start talking to you, and they know how to refer you because they're like, Peter's the guy. If you want to know how to do this and retire in 10 years without having to like, make this your full-time job, Peter's the. I mean, I don't. I'm just now getting to know you, and I mean, just the couple things I've picked up, I'm like, is enough to like get. Oh, yeah, that would be interesting. Maybe I do want to talk with Peter,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
It's interesting because you take the red pill, right? In the Matrix, you
yeah,
take the red pill and you start to see when you are so focused on one thing, I've got a framework now that I take clients through. It's a simple framework. And a lot of them are like, duh, it's like, but if you just check these few boxes, we talk about buying power, staying power, and growing power as an example. We want to be able to have buying power. How do we determine that? And there's a few disciplines that we look at to determine if we've got buying power. But when we buy, you're not going to get wealthy off of usually one property typically,
uh-huh,
and so we want to have staying power. We want to stay in that. We want to buy and hold and stay in that property. But then staying is great, but all of us want to grow, right? We want to grow inside of our real estate portfolio. And my false assumption was I needed to have lots and lots and lots of doors, and in order to be able to be financially free. And I've learned that that is not the case. If you could have 10 to 20 properties, great little assets, and I can show you how to find them, how to invest in them, 10 to 20 great little assets, you can be financially free. And you can do that inside of 10 years. And you just have to follow a very basic framework. And that's what we love to teach people. And you don't get that framework, you don't get that granular, you don't get that good if you're, a jack of all trades,
yeah,
right?
yeah, 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 yeah. You only get that good when you're focused on doing that thing,
Right.
you know?
Yes.
And you just let all the other stuff go,
Yes.
And
And it's
so,
hard to do, especially when you're starting out and you need to make a paycheck and you need to
yeah,
keep the family fed. I totally, totally get it. And
yeah,
so that's where a relationship helped me, that $1 million relationship. They were referring enough of this kind of business that I could say with confidence no to a few things that I used to need to say yes or felt like I needed to say yes to.
yeah,
And so you start to be able to so it's a matter of, hey, maybe you're having to say yes to a lot of other things initially, but if you can find that one relationship, those two or three relationships inside of something that you want to be an expert at. I'm passionate about real estate. I love real estate. I love teaching investors how to invest in real estate, and so I'm blessed to be able to do that. I love my job. I don't like sometimes the mortgage side of, gets a little complex. But in the end, I love what I do and helping and serving people. And so I'm grateful for that. But, I needed that relationship so that I could say no to some of the other stuff that
yeah.
was keeping me, from being able to really do that on a full-time basis.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Peter, for anyone who might be listening to this and just kind of thinking to themselves, man, Kevin, I really like Peter. I like who he is. I like how he shows up. And I like some of what he's shared here. And it's really resonating with me. And maybe they'd like to find out more about what you do and more about how you might be able to help them. Any website and resources we can share with folks?
Yeah, I'm so grateful for that. So for your listeners, we want to give them a free tool. And
Okay.
so they can go on to investorlighthouse.com investorlighthouse.com. And
Okay.
in the upper right-hand corner, Kevin, they will find Analyze Your Deal Free. It's a tool, a deal analyzer tool that they can click on that. They put their email address in there because they want to be able to store and save the data that they're going to insert. And
Okay.
so they're just creating an account. And then when they do that, then it just asks 15 basic questions about a deal that they're analyzing. If they answer those 15 questions, what it does is it checks it against our framework. It tells them if they've got buying power, staying power, and growing power inside of that deal. And then they're going to look for just a big green, it's going to green for go, yellow for caution, red for stop. And they
Okay.
can schedule time with me right there, and we can go look at that deal that they're analyzing. And I'd be honored to help them determine if it's the right deal, even if they have Uncle Joe who's in the mortgage space. We want to just serve and help as many people as possible. And so that would be the best place to hit us up is investorlighthouse.com. And they can schedule with us there. They can use our free tool. We'd love to help them.
Awesome. Well, for those of you listening to this, all you got to do is just like scroll down a little bit and you'll find those links because I'm going to make sure that we include them along with this podcast. So they're going to be right down below for you, nice and easy for you to access there. So, Peter, any last thing that you feel led to share before we call it a wrap?
Well, I'm just grateful that there are people like you, Kevin, that do this. I've been the product of great information, around things that I need. And I love this concept of these $1 million relationships, and the networking and and how to build deep and meaningful relationships. I love real estate, so to have meaningful experts out there, teaching real estate and real estate investing. I'm grateful for you and your efforts this is not easy, I know, but you probably love it. But it's,
I do. I love having
yeah.
conversations with entrepreneurs like you, Peter. I totally feed off of that. It's
It still work though at times, I'm sure. And so I'm
oh
grateful
yeah,
for you.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you. And I'd just say keep up the good work. And if we can support you in any way or any of your listeners in any way as they seek to create some financial freedom, financial security in their lives, man, that we'd be honored to help them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to just have this conversation and just share from your heart. And I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you. And I'm excited to get this out there and share it with folks. So thanks so much, Peter.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
You bet.